Okay guys, welcome to this video tutorial on downloading and installing and using Multisim. Multisim is some circuit simulation software that uses the SPICE simulation model, which you don't need to know all that at this point, but we'll be using this software much of the time for doing labs in several classes throughout the electronics engineering technology program. So many of you are probably new, and so you don't already have this software. You may not know what it is, and you may not have even been through enough electronics classes or class work yet to really do much with it. But I thought I would at least introduce you to it. That way you can download it, install it, get it working, and then that way you'll be prepared when you do need it to do some lab work. So you should have a link to this in your Moodle section for the class, and this appears in several of our classes, so you should be able to easily find it. In my classes, it's under Resources and Links, and so you can see it here. This is the Multisim Academic or the Student Education version. So there are 2 or 3 different versions or varieties of Multisim, so you want to make sure that you don't accidentally download the wrong one, because the serial number here won't work with any other version. And this link should take you to the correct place. So to begin, you would click on this link. If I click on this link, at least in my class, it will actually go to the link and it'll take you out of Moodle. So what I do is I right click on it and say open in new tab. But you don't have to do that. You can just simply click on the link and go there. You also need to make note of the serial number and some other little instructions here, which are kind of self-explanatory once you get to this page. But you can highlight this serial number and right click and hit copy. That way you'll have it when you need it during the installation. Okay, so it did open that in a new tab, and so here it is. Here is the Multisim page. This is the Multisim version 14.2 for education. You can select the professional version from this page, but don't download the professional version. It will not work with that serial number. It's going to be a 32-bit application, so it should run on just about any late model computer. It's not a 64-bit application. That could cause some issues on some of your computers. We're going to accept the cookie policy on the website just to get that banner to go away. And again, it's version 14.2. As you can see, you can actually download an older version if you were requested to do that, but the latest version should be fine. Then you would click the download button. When you do that, it's going to take you to another page where you're going to have to create an account. And I already have an account, and so you can see that there. But if you don't have an account, and you probably do not, you would enter your first and last name and your role as a student. Let me go ahead and give you a hint. Go ahead and select, before you even put in your name, go ahead and select role as a student, because when you do that, it's going to change over. It's going to change these fields. The company field is going to change to school. And then they're going to ask you for your expected graduation date as well. So you can put that. It doesn't really matter what that date is. Just put it whatever, 2 years from now. So then you would create an account. Like I said, I already have an account, so I'm not going to be clicking the create account button at this point. And once you go through that, you're going to end up downloading an installation file. And once you download an installation file, you would go to wherever that downloaded, probably your downloads folder, and then you're going to double click on it, and you're going to have internet access, which you should if you've already went through what we just looked at. And it's going to take a little while. Depending on your computer, this could, take 5 or 10 minutes, and it could take an hour or two, to be honest. Multisim has always been a little bit slow on the installation procedure, so just be patient. Get it started, let it do its thing, and then you can come back and check on it maybe in 30 minutes or whatever, so you can go off doing something else, and that way you don't have to sit there and watch it. It may ask you a question or two. I had one student that emailed me and said that it showed a table of a bunch of different applications with a field beside each one to paste in a serial number. And so the student didn't know which particular software package to get. Just make sure you find the Multisim Academic. If you are presented with a long list of all these different programs or applications, just find the one that says Multisim Academic or Multisim Student or something like that, and then put the serial number here beside that, and you should be good to go. If you have problems, just you can send me a screenshot or something, and we'll try to work through that for you. Okay, so once you've gone through all of that, and then at some point you will finally have Multisim installed, and probably or hopefully it'll put a couple of icons on the desktop, or at least one icon that says NI Multisim or Multisim or whatever. But you can see what the icon looks like here. It's a purple, like a deep purple, bluish purple with some white and gold lines in it. I'm running version 14.0. The latest one is 14.2. I haven't upgraded yet, but I'll give you a little secret. This program hasn't changed in 10 years. So even back to versions 11 and 12 and 13, they look and operate just like the latest version. So I don't know what they're doing every time they do a new version or an update. They might be adding a few components, and they might be doing some stuff behind the scenes, but it doesn't look any different. So, okay, one little piece of housekeeping that you need to do after you install Multisim is you probably want to turn off the automatic updates. And to do that, you would go to Start and scroll down to National Instruments, which is here. Notice if you did not get an icon on your desktop, notice Multisim is located right here in your Start menu, and you can just drag that to the desktop, and that'll create an icon on your desktop for you, a link, and then you don't have to go here every time to start it. But go into the National Instruments folder, and you want to look for the update service. NI Update Service, National Instruments Update Service. Click on that, and when you do, let's see if it'll work for me. This is my office computer, and it's doing it on my other monitor, so let me drag it over here. So it's checking for updates, and it has found a few things, but I'm not worried about that. But I want to show you, go into File, Preferences, and it's not going to let me do it because it's asking for administrator rights. But you will be able to do it on your own computer. Basically, when you go to File and Preferences, you should see a checkbox that says automatically run the updater or something like that, and you want to uncheck that. If you uncheck that, then this is not going to aggravate you every time you turn your computer on and you get this window to pop up from National Instruments wanting to check for updates and download updates. Most of these updates here you don't even need. And like I said, the program works fine as it is. I'm working on a much older version than you're going to be using, and it works fine. So you should be okay. So turn your automatic updates off. You don't have to, but I'm going to forewarn you, it will aggravate you, or it does me. All right, so now that we've got the program installed, and hopefully you do at this point, we can go ahead and double click on Multisim, and we are going to run it. And it actually came up with a splash screen, but that occurred on my other monitor, so you didn't see that. Then you should see a window similar to this. There are different parts to this window. A couple of them you can get rid of if you wanted to. Over here on the left is the design toolbox. You can get rid of that. It's not needed. So just click the little X there. That goes away. Down at the bottom, this window can come and go. It will show you results and things as you use the software. I like to just move the mouse and just make that window smaller. Not necessarily get rid of it, just make it smaller. And then here is your workspace. Here is the workspace. Let's see. And if you want that design toolbox back, you can. Just some people like the way that looks, where you have the sidebar on the left, the footer down here at the bottom, and then the workspace. At this point, you can use, if you have a scroll type mouse, you can use the scroll wheel on the mouse to zoom in and out on the workspace, so you can actually zoom in. This is kind of like a gridded workspace where you're going to draw your circuit. We're going to go through a simple circuit here for you. There's a grid that helps you line up your parts. You can turn that grid off if you don't like it. So you just go to View, uncheck the grid, and then you get just a plain white space, which is fine. I like the grid personally until I get ready to screenshot or print something. Then I'll turn the grid off just to make it go away. Okay, so the next part of our software here is at the top. This is kind of familiar territory where you have some what's called toolbars. Toolbars and your action menu all up here. And you'll notice at the top you've got the standard file, edit, view. Those are things that appear in many Windows programs. So that's nothing new. So you can go to File, Save As to save your work, save your program or your simulation. You can open up a simulation that you've already saved before, and I'll show you how to do that. So let's build something. Up here, we have a toolbar that contains icons that takes us into different categories of components. And you don't really have to worry too much about these buttons, and I'll explain why in a moment. Over here on the far right, down the right side, is all of your test equipment, and there's lots of really cool test equipment over here. Some is very simple, some is very complicated, and we'll use some of that as you dive deeper into being an electronics student, into some of the different classes that you have. But I'll show you a basic one today in this tutorial. So the first icon up here for parts, because at this point we want to start putting parts in our workspace, is there's a ground symbol, and if I put my mouse over it, it says place source. Next to that is a symbol for a resistor, and that says place basic. But again, don't get too caught up in that. Just click the first one, that little ground symbol, and that opens up this window called Select a Component. And if you'll notice, clicking on any of these will open up that same window. So back to the first one, select a component. Components, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of components that are in Multisim that you can use. And they've done a really good job of categorizing everything into what they call groups and families. So mainly you have major groups, and if you click on this group here, you can see these are all of the groups: sources, basic, diodes, transistors, analog, TTL and CMOS, and MCU. Those three are digital parts as opposed to analog. Advanced peripherals, miscellaneous digital, and so forth. Or you can just select all groups, and it will list every part that Multisim has here under the component list, which that's not very helpful. So let's start with the first one, sources. Notice the second group is basic, and then the third group is diodes. Those correspond to these buttons up here, where you can actually go directly into a group when the select a component window opens. But normally I just click on the very first one, and it brings me to the group called sources. This is where you're going to find all of your power sources and anything related to what we call sources. Under that group, we have what we call families, which are just kind of like subcategories. Being able to consolidate things into smaller groups. So these are called families. So what we have is power sources. If I click on power sources, these are all of my power sources. And you can see there are not many. There's about 15 of them here. Then we can have signal voltage sources. We got some choices there. Signal current sources. We have some choices there, and so forth. For most of our classes, you would use either power sources family or the signal voltage sources. So let's go to power sources. I always start there because every circuit is normally going to need power and a ground. A multisim requires that every circuit that you build has a ground, regardless of whether the ground symbol really is necessary. But multisim requires it. So you're going to have to put a ground in every circuit you do. For the circuit that we're going to build right now, we're going to choose a battery, which is a DC power source. So I'm going to select that and hit OK. And now look at my mouse. My mouse has the part attached to it as I move it around. If I decide that I don't want that part, if you accidentally pick the wrong part, then you can just right click and it'll disappear. It'll go away. Then go back and click back into the selected component. Go back and get the component that you need. Let's do the ground first, because we always have to have a ground, so you might as well start with it so you don't forget it. There's our ground, and let's just put it right here, the bottom left. And now let's go back and get the battery, which is DC power. You can also have AC power. So if you were trying to simulate a circuit using 120 volts AC, like would be found in your home, the power that goes to all of your receptacles in a house, then we would use AC power. And the symbol looks different. It's a circle with the little wavy line in it and a positive and negative terminal. So, but we want DC power. That's the symbol for a battery. And so now I'm going to click OK. And I'm going to place it right here. And notice as soon as I place it, the selected component window comes back up. And Multisim is doing that because it's saying, hey, you just placed a component, you probably want to place another one. So it opened it. If for some reason that you're done, you can just hit close and this window will go away. All right, so now we have placed a battery and a ground. Looking good so far. Now I need a light bulb. So let's go to to group, and we've got to find where the light bulbs would be. That might be under basic. Let's see if it's under basic. And scrolling down through the families, I don't see a family where I might find a light bulb. So let's try a different group. How about indicators? Click on indicators. And then the families there are voltmeter, ammeter, probe, buzzer. Oh, lamp. That's what I want. I want a lamp. So click on lamp. And now you have some choices. Notice there's not a whole lot of choices here, but you do have some choices. And since we're going to use a 12-volt power source, we need to make sure that we choose a 12-volt lamp or bulb, whatever you feel comfortable in calling that. I want to call it a bulb, but more generically and universally known as a lamp. So let's pick the 12-volt, 10-watt lamp. So I click on it and click OK. I also think you can double-click on it. Yep. And let's put it here on the workspace. And as soon as I placed it, the selected component window pops back up. Let's get a switch. I'd love to have a switch where we can turn this lamp on and off. So let's go back to group and let's try basic. Going back to basic, and now under the family, switch, there it is. So when I click on switch, you can see that we got lots of switches to choose from, or quite a few switches to choose from. And I want a plain toggle switch, like would be on the wall in your house to turn a light on and off. And that's going to be what's called a single pole, single throw switch. SPST, which is right here. SPST. And there's the symbol for it. So let's click OK. And there I have a switch. And let's put it right here. Like so. And I think we're done. So the selected component window popped back up. I'm just going to hit close to get rid of it. And now I'm going to start placing these kind of where in my mind I think I want them. I can always move them around. And so I just click and drag and move it where I want it. Be careful when you're clicking on components. Sometimes you can just click on not the entire component, but just the text or the label that goes with the component. See that? I'm just clicking on the labels, and that's not going to move the component. When you click on text, you'll get the four corners. When you click on a component, you get a dotted line box around all of it, and that's what you want to get to move that entire component. All right, so I want to turn this bulb 90 degrees clockwise, so I'm going to right click on it and rotate 90 degrees clockwise, just like that. I think that looks better for what I'm trying to do, and just trying to make everything look neat. We'll move this up a little, like so. All right, so now let's begin to wire up our components. And to do that, you just simply go to the wiring connections for each component, like so, and just click. Once you click, you don't have to hold it. Just click, and now it's turned, your cursor is turned into a wire, and it's saying, hey, where do you want this wire to go? So I want it to go to the switch. Click, and then it puts it in place. It connects it. Go to the other side of the switch, click, go to the lamp, click. Then come out of the lamp, click, and go to the battery, click. Now I don't like the way that looks because it didn't space that wire out. So what you can do is just click on the wire and you can drag it to where you want it, like so. Also, I don't have to, but I think I'm going to change the color of this wire because this is the negative side of the battery. And if you know anything about wiring, like in a car or DC wiring, a lot of times the negative wiring is black and the positive wiring is red. So I'm going to right click on this wire and say segment color and choose black and click OK. And now that turns into a black wire. I like that. Also, I think my switch is too far up. I'm going to make sure I highlight it, and then I'm going to drag it down just a little, and notice it brings the wires with it, so it stays connected. And now I've got to hook my ground up, so just simply connect it there. Now when I did that, it undid the coloring scheme that I had going. I don't like that, so I'm going to probably have to do some individual wires at this point because it's separated that one wire into multiple wires now, and that's okay. And you don't have to change the color. The color has really nothing to do with other than looks. Just like in the real world, electricity does not care what the color of the wire is, and Multisim does not care what the color of the wire is. But the color sometimes is very helpful when you have a much more complicated circuit than what we've got here. Now, if you notice that switch, it has the words key equals space. And what that means is currently this switch has been assigned the space bar as the key on the keyboard that can operate it. I can click on the switch, see that? I can click on it with my mouse and open and close it. But I can also use the space bar on the keyboard. See that? So I'm clicking the space bar. Space bar opens, space bar closes. Space bar opens, space bar closes. You can change that. You can right click on this component. You have to be careful because clicking on it wants to operate it. So you have to click over here to the side of it a little bit. You can right click and go to properties, and you can change the key on the keyboard that operates that switch if you want to. If you only have one switch, the space bar works really well. If you have more than one switch, you're going to have different keys for each switch, most likely, unless you want all the switches to work with one key, open and close together like synchronous. Now, we have our circuit built, and this, by the way, is a simple circuit that some of you might have built in elementary school as a little science project or something that you did in science class, where you had a battery and a switch and a light bulb. So a very familiar circuit with a lot of people even before they take the electronics engineering technology program. So we're going to see if our circuit works. And to do that, I'm going to come up here to, this is the run button. It looks like a play button. It's green triangle, and I'm going to click on it. When you click on it, Multisim is now going to go into the run mode. It's actually simulating our circuit. And if you'll notice, all these buttons have grayed out, meaning that you can't add components. We can't edit our circuit because Multisim is running. And I know that Multisim is running because if you look down here at the bottom right, that little green bar graph is telling me that Multisim is currently simulating the circuit. And this transpired is showing me how many seconds have gone by in the actual simulation, which this many times is not running in real time. And we'll talk about that later down the road. That's a little bit more advanced. But for what we're doing, this doesn't matter. So if I press the space bar on the keyboard, what should happen to the lamp? It should light up. And it did. It's got that little yellow glow that tells me that the lamp is illuminated. And if I hit space bar again, then the lamp should turn off. Yay, it does appear to work. So if you've successfully done this, then you've built your first circuit. Congratulations. Now, there are some things that we can do in Multisim. So let's go up here and hit stop, because I'm done simulating for right now. We can add some things to the circuit. Let's add another switch. So how would we do that? Well, first of all, let's just disconnect this wire. So I click on it and hit delete on the keyboard, or you can right click on it and hit delete. Either way, it'll get rid of that wire. And let's slide this switch over, because we're going to put in another switch. And now that this switch is highlighted, I'm going to right click and hit copy. And then I'm going to click away, and then I'm going to right click and hit paste. And see, I've got a new switch. Or you could have gone up here to the selected component and you could found the switch and you could put it in that way. I think this is just a quicker way of doing that. Now let's wire it up, connect our wires again, like so. Now how does this circuit work? We've got two switches and both switches are in line with each other. We call it in series. They're in line with each other. And what is it going to take to get the lamp to turn on? Well, you probably can take a good guess and say that it takes both switches is going to have to be closed, not just one of them, but both of them will have to close before the lamp will light up. Let's change the key for that second switch. We can double click on it and change the key from a space bar to B. Let's change it to the B key. Let's change this one to the A key. It says capital A. I'm not sure. It might be, it could be just the A key. Doesn't matter whether it's capital or lowercase, I think. Yep. So just hitting the A key on the keyboard will operate that switch. The B key operates switch 2. If I close both of them, ooh, why is my light not on? Well, that's because we're currently not simulating. We're not in the run mode. So let's open the switches and let's go back to run. Look down here. We got the little green bar graph going back and forth like the old Knight Rider car from the 80s, early 80s. Anyway, now let's close one switch. Nothing happens. Let's close the second switch. Light comes on. Yay, that works. Okay, so we're going to open up both switches, turn the light off, and we can stop the circuit. Now going further with Multisim, Multisim allows you to do measurements. So you can get into Multisim and you can make measurements of your circuit, not just see it operate, which is great. We can actually take some voltage measurements, current measurements, power measurements, resistance measurements, things that you can do in the real lab on a breadboard with real equipment, but we can do that here. I know that some of you are probably new and you haven't talked about some of the theory yet, so we're not going to get into all of that. So we're going to use something simple. We're going to do a simple measurement, and we're going to go and grab the multimeter, which is the very first instrument over here on the far right in that column. And see, now I have a multimeter, and I'm going to put it right there on the screen. And now a multimeter has a positive and a negative lead. They're like probes that you hold in your hand, and you can measure voltage. Some of you probably used a multimeter before, or a voltmeter. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to measure the voltage coming to this lamp. So to do that, I'm going to connect it. I'm going to put my positive over here on the positive side, and my negative will go over here to the negative side, just like that. And the multimeter lead color, I'm thankful that it did. It didn't do that. It did it automatically, but had all of these been red where we didn't change it to black, it would have kept that red as well. So I'm glad it changed this to black instead of changing all these to red like it did a while ago. So now we have the multimeter across, what we call a cross or a parallel with the lamp. So let's double click on the multimeter and make sure it's set properly. It should come up by default measuring DC volts, and it does. Notice that the V is selected and the straight line means DC. If we wanted to measure AC volts, we would select the little curly line, and you'll learn about that in more in this first semester ELC 131 class if you're in that class. So we are currently measuring DC volts. We could measure DC amps, which would be current, or ohms. We can measure that, or decibels, which is another class. But you have to be careful, because if you're measuring different parameters, you can't do it the way that we're doing here. And you will learn about that as well in class, is how to use a multimeter or a voltmeter and a current meter or an ammeter. Or a power meter, or an ohm meter. This is called a multimeter, meaning that it can be multiple types of meters. And currently, we want it to measure voltage, so it's a voltmeter. So let's go back and run the circuit. So I press play, and you can see that Multisim tries to mimic real circuits, and this is in case you don't know, this is a very, very tiny voltage. It might look big to you, but NV stands for nanovolts. A nanovolt is very tiny. That is actually much smaller than any voltmeter can measure. So for all practical purposes, right now it's measuring 0 volts at the lamp. So you just have to be careful with the measurements that Multisim gives you, and use some common sense with them. If you haven't learned the metric system and learning your metric prefixes for like nanovolts or millivolts or microvolts, then you will. That's coming down the road. If you have learned those, then you should know that this is a very tiny number, very small number. Now if I close both switches, the lamp comes on, and look at there. We have 12 volts on the lamp, which is what we should have. 12 volts at the lamp. Okay? So let's hit stop, and oops, let's go back to start, and let's open the switches. So turn the lamp back off, or actually we can just leave one switch closed, and now we can just toggle this switch to toggle the lamp on and off. Let's change our battery voltage. So let's make our battery voltage go up. So let's change it to 24. And hit enter. It says the simulation is running. Any change you made in the design will not take effect until you restart. Okay, so we've got to hit stop and then start again. Again, we got a very, very tiny voltage here because we've got a switch open. So let's close that switch. We close the switch. Now both switches are closed. My light's not on. Why is the lamp not on? We've got 24 volts there. Notice what happened to the lamp. You notice the filament burn out in the lamp? We just burned that bulb out. Why? Because it's a 12-volt lamp. You can't put 24 volts on a 12-volt lamp. It's going to burn it out pretty quick. In this case, it was almost instant. So Multisim is simulating real world. It's letting me know that, wait a minute, we have too much voltage on that lamp, and it has now burned out. So I need to open up the switch, hit stop, and let's go back and change the voltage to 12. And now we can hit start. And every time you hit stop and start, it'll reset or replace the bulb for you. So no problem there. So turn the lamp on. 12 volts is no problem. Open the switch, lamp turns off. And so that is kind of a introduction to using Multisim. Let me show you one more thing. Let's get rid of the meter. So just click on the meter and hit delete. Oh, I got to stop the circuit. So we were running. That gets me sometimes. It'll get you too. And it has crashed. Interestingly, I did this exact same thing yesterday and it crashed as well. And I'm not really sure why. There was something that I'm doing in that circuit that's causing that. And guess what? Since I didn't save it, so I didn't teach you guys how to save, it's all gone. So let's build that. I'm not going to explain it. I just want to build that back real quick. I can build it back pretty quick, hopefully. Switch. I'm just going to do one switch. You guys know how the two switches work. Get my lamp, 12 volt, 10 watt. That's good. We're going to rotate it 90 degrees clockwise. Let's hook everything up. Change those to black, which is not completely necessary, by the way. But since I already showed you how to do that, I'm going to make it consistent. And what I should have told you earlier and did not was, before you go too far, once you get your circuit started, I would save it. So now I'm going to save it. Save as. And when you save as, it's going to default to a National Instruments folder on your computer, which you do not want to save it in there. It's hard to find. So come over here and find a place that's very familiar, like Documents, or even Desktop. That's even better. Let's do Desktop. And I'm going to name this Basic Circuit 1. You name it whatever. Normally you would name it whatever lab you're working on, like Lab 1 or Lab A or whatever. Basic Circuit 1, and hit Save. Now, if I go to my desktop, it should be there. Let's see. It might have, yeah, it showed up on my other monitor. There it is. See that? Basic Circuit 1. And you can put that on a flash drive or whatever, and then that way you'll have it with you. Now, if for some reason the program crashes, I've got the circuit built. And as I go along, I can continue to save by using this Save button up here. So if I make a change, make sure you save it. You know the drill. It's like with anything else. So my fault for not saving earlier and had to lose everything. The one other thing I wanted to show you is they've got these handy probes right here. You see these little green probes? So if I go back and run this circuit and click the space bar, I can actually bring down a voltage probe, a current probe, a power probe, and a differential voltage. Don't worry about that one. Here's a voltage and current probe. That works really well. Let's grab that one. And we're going to have to place the probe on a wire. When you have the probe in a acceptable location, the info box will turn yellow. See that? It's gray otherwise. So let's put it right here, coming into the bulb. And so then you can click on this box and you can move this around if you want to get everything, because sometimes you can use more than one probe. For example, I can bring another probe over here before the switch, like that. And let me press the switch, turn the switch off. And notice that over here, coming out of the battery, we have 12 volts. No current, really. I mean, the current is so small, and that would be what we call leakage current, or just stray current. Nothing of any significance. Same thing over here. We got some stray voltage that's showing up. 1.73 microvolts is too small for a voltmeter to even measure. So basically no voltage at the bulb and no current. Close the switch. And what do we have? We've still got 12 volts over here coming out of the battery, and we have 833 milliamps of current. Over here at the bulb, we also have 12 volts and 833 milliamps of current. And 833 milliamps, in case you don't know, that is 0.833 amps, or about 0.8 amps. So not quite 1 amp of current. The wattage of the bulb determines how much current it will draw from the power source. So a 10-watt bulb will not draw as much current as a 20-watt bulb, for example, or a 100-watt bulb. So the higher the wattage of the bulb, the more current that it will draw. And you're going to learn Ohm's law. That's coming up very soon if you haven't already started talking about it. If you know Ohm's law, then you can figure some of this out. If you don't know Ohm's law, you're going to learn it pretty soon, and then you would be able to calculate how much current a 12-volt 10-watt bulb should draw. Before you even measured it on paper, you should be able to say, okay, well, it's going to draw about 833 milliamps. I haven't done the math. I mean, I could pull out my calculator and do that. Oh, well, let me try it. Let's see. So the current would be, I know the voltage. So yeah, it's 833 milliamps. Actually 833.33333. So if I use the Ohm's law formula for calculating what the current would be, it's exactly what we're measuring here. So that's another good thing about Multisim. If you're doing calculations and you want to confirm whether your calculations are correct, Multisim can kind of help check your work. So anyway, that's using the voltage probes. You can actually, let's stop the circuit and then we can hit save, and it'll save these voltage probes there for you. It'll save everything that you have in the circuit. Hit the space bar to open back up, hit save, and there it is. All right, let's see. I think that covers all the basics anyway. At least gets you started in using Multisim. There's lots of things that you can do in Multisim. Even this circuit that we just built, I showed you how to add a switch. You could add multiple switches. You can add multiple lamps. Building more complex little basic circuits for demonstrating. A great learning tool, very great learning tool. We're going to be using this some. So this is the first video to get you started into Multisim, and there will be some others to come along to show you how to do other things in Multisim as you need them. So with that, if you have questions, contact me, contact your instructor, and be sure to check out the upcoming additional videos in this series called Multisim Basics. Thank you, guys.